Hello and welcome to your All Stats No Res podcast, the premier Dominions 5 podcast. I am here this week, HP Munchcraft, here with Rob CA, Sauron, and Darkwolf to discuss what makes nations S tier. But before we get into that, just want to say that all these guys at this point have their own YouTube channel, and when I get less lazy, I will start linking their channels in the description so you can go see them. And all of them at this point have some videos out. So, congrats to all of you on joining the YouTuber grind set.
I have had my own channel since before this podcast began, but you are only doing this now that they both put out videos.
Correct.
I feel targeted and abused.
What do you mean by videos? You mean video? Yeah, one video.
Yes, there
Yeah,
is
no, I
one.
forgot yours.
By the
Terrible.
time this is edited, you might have a second video.
Might.
Doubt.
By the time this is
Press
edited,
X to doubt. Yeah.
Press X to
Alright.
doubt.
I don't
Can
know.
I
Maybe
ever make anything as well edited as what I've already made? Probably not.
does
that was the
doesn't
That video
Darkwolf
was
have
fantastic.
Darkwolf has two? Maybe
I think I have
might.
3.
Oh, you have
Two,
three.
perhaps three.
Blog?
We can't
Nice.
remember. It's just too high for us to
It's
count.
been so long.
Yeah, right. You haven't. Well, whatever. Maybe this will be an incentive for you to make some more videos or finish up what you've done. Whatever.
Maybe.
All right. So, for any of you that have been living under a rock, people in video gaming love to make tier lists of which nations from like low to high, high to low of like their fighting game characters or nations in Dominions 5. And in this, the main purpose of this is to argue about them and discuss the opinions. But what we'll be talking about this week is, personally for us, what makes an S tier nation S tier. And to start that off, we'll start off with some, like, just a quick definition of how you would define S tier, because what's weird about tier lists is everybody goes in tier lists and argues, but nobody really gives necessarily definitions of what their tiers are supposed to be.
So, I thought about this so much that I didn't think about this at all. But what it comes down to is that an S tier nation is, my opinion, is a nation that when the resources of 2 players are generally equal, then an S tier nation means a worse player can beat a better one, right? Like an A tier nation means 2 players of equal skill. The player with the A tier nation will generally have an advantage of some form, as slight as it is.
Right.
But with an S tier nation, you can have, and I'm not saying like a terrible player will beat a great one, right? But like you can have a good player beat a better player if the good player is playing, let's say like Scalaria, and the better player is playing Zabalba,
Okay.
because the tools the nation affords you provides a built-in advantage when used to their fullest.
And is that relative to all the other tiers, or does the S tier nation just have to beat like B tier, provide that advantage to, against like B tier and a lower, or is it like S tier provides it against all?
S tier provides it against all, but it's worth noting that like the value diminishes the higher up you go. Like really, the key thing of an S tier nation is you can compare it to all the A tier nations and be like, this nation is better than them. If a nation is better than everything in A tier by like a noticeable degree, then generally I'm of the opinion it should be elevated to S. But that is a rare thing, because that also, a key thing is S tier nations should have less bad matchups.
Right. Clearly. So, how about Rav? Do you want to say what your definition of what an S tier nation is?
No, I don't want to say that. I don't have a definition.
Okay, you just anything that is the top of your tier list is S tier.
Well, I had a couple of criteria that I thought were important to hit. I don't know if it makes up a definition exactly. There's probably some room for exception, but I kind of ranked them in priority I thought was important.
Okay.
I would say the first thing is you need to have some kind of powerful option which can cover your weakness. so that if you misplay in some way, you still have something you can rely on to kind of carry the nation.
Mm.
It's important to have more than one tool set, so you can't be simply countered by something. So a wide array of tools is important. Scalability is really important. It means with equal land or territory, you can gain a practical resource advantage because your nation scales harder. And then lastly, and this is less important, strategic flexibility. So like it just allows you a wider array of strategic options. Like an example, I'm not saying Calum is S tier, but because they have flying, they have more strategic flexibility than a nation that's exactly the same without flying.
But so like I would uh, give another example. You, I believe, still think that Nazca's S tier, where some of
Yes.
us other guys don't, and you would say, well, Nazca's a flying nation, so that fits its
Yep.
strategic flexibility criteria
Yep.
there.
Nazca is flying. Nazca has insane scalability. It lacks, I would say, first war power options, but past that point, it does have power options in the form of its mages that it can use for the rest of the game. And it has a wide array of tools that it can potentially dip into if it wants to. So that's why I think they're S tier.
All right. Soren, are you ready for your definition, or do you want me to try?
Sure. I'll try to give this. There's probably something I'm missing. I was kind of blindsided by this topic. But
All right.
so the way I view tier lists are in a more of a practical way. A lot of people like to talk about like the theory when you're playing games, but I like to be realistic with like how like a tier list you could actually apply to your game. So what's important to me is like, if the nation is going to be like, for instance, if it's S tier, no matter who is piloting it, no matter what skill level they are, if the nation is still a constant threat or it's something you have to deal with, because if you don't, it's going to be like insanely hard to deal with. Like then that's like an S tier nation. So like for example, surprise, surprise, I think Scalera is an S tier nation because it doesn't matter if there's a pro or a noob piloting it, it's still dealing with throngs and throngs of undead every single turn on every province is hard to deal with, regardless of the nation you're playing. And it doesn't matter how skillful you are if that nation gets to that point, because you still have to, like, you are required at that point to deal with those resources. So that's like one of the bigger things like that I value personally as a player. The second thing is like a nation is going to be like S tier if they have like strong trait combinations. So for example, having stealth and high map move is really good when you have a good chassis. So that combination of things is really strong, and it requires you to have specific counters, or else it's going to run all over you. You can look at things like Pan, like, they have high map move, very strong sacreds that can, take your PD with like minimal effort. So, kind of a strong thing for that nation. Some minor things that I think are important for for a nation to be S tier, and this is why I don't think Scalera or not Scalera, Nazca is
Nazca.
an S tier. And like a nation needs to have a workhorse mage that is a true workhorse. That means an affordable mage that you can produce. It's not a big deal, and you're gonna make it throughout the game. And it's not your flex mage; it's your workhorse. You're gonna have a lot of these. They're gonna do its jobs. I don't think Nazca has this guy. I think he's too expensive. We already shit on the Huron priest, and you already know that if you watch the videos. A nation having strong troops and commanders is important. Sometimes you'll have nations that have really strong commanders or just really strong troops. You can look at this like in MA Marignon. They have exceptionally strong troops in the form of their sacreds, but their mages suck ass. The witch hunter is trash. Like he is a bad mage.
We're playing
No,
the hits, I see.
and then I think the probably the most important minor thing that an S tier nation has is the versatility of the build. It is not a one note strategy that elevates this nation. It can be flexed in a variety of ways, and with that flex, these different kinds of builds are still powerful. You can have a scaling build that's powerful. You can have a Hellbless that's powerful. You can have a mid tier build that is just as that these are all problematic builds that can be flexed, and it's not just like, oh, we're running stats and stats makes this nation better. I love my frogs, but if you don't go some of those builds, that nation sucks. So versatility is important to me, and I think having criteria is important. But yeah, that's why I'll probably disagree with a lot of Dominions players you might hear in the community. I don't think tier lists, to like wrap this up, are the most useful, but I guess they're fun to discuss. But people get into like the theory arguments, and it's just a mess.
Right. Well, people put out tier lists because we like to argue about tier lists most of the time. Um, so for my definition of S tier, it's a little more simplistic, maybe a little bit cheating, but my definition of S tier is just if you are in a tournament format with picks and bans, then it's something that has to be dealt with in that is worth either banning or first picking, but it's not something that you can ignore like early in the rounds. You can't just be like, oh yeah, I'll let my opponent have it. It's something that is like you either have to get it or you have to ban it or you're at a serious disadvantage. And I think to go into a little more detail, because y'all went into a little more detail, I think that having that broken mechanic or the one broken thing is probably the most important criteria for an S tier nation for me, where like you have like Scalaria. I think we all agree that Scalaria is S tier, but it has that one broken mechanic. It has the infinite skeletons that just means that dealing with it is harder than than any other nation would be to counter. It doesn't mean you can't counter Scalaria, but you just don't want to be in a position where you have to, because you're just always going to be at a disadvantage. That's my criteria.
I will say I think that there's a hole in that criteria.
Uh oh, what is it?
You'll remember that in some late age games, in I think in fact not this year's tourney finals, but the qualifiers for the finals the year before, there were like four late age games. Late age Roulier, despite I think everybody agreeing not being an S tier nation, was banned in all of them.
Uh, I'm
And the
arguing.
reason it was banned was not because it was so strong. It was because people didn't want to have to deal with them.
I am arguing that that is a scrub reason to ban a nation, and it doesn't play into my tier
Yeah.
list at all. Yeah,
Okay. You're gonna write that little exception clause at the bottom in the fine print.
it's not an exception.
If you're
I'm
scrubbing,
saying
if
I'm
you're
saying I'm
scrubbing, you
saying
ban a nation because you don't want to
worth.
deal with it
All right, worth banning, worth first picking or banning specifically for
because of the
reasons.
power level.
Right, because of power level, not because I don't want to play with them in game. It's like fuck you. Like,
Hey, listen, to your defense, HP, I don't think water nations should be in competitive dominions at all. So the fact that people had to ban them at all is, just flame at Lucid. You shouldn't be allowing water nations in this tournament. That's my hot take. I think water nations are just broke. It's not that they're stronger than land nations, to be clear. I just think the dance that happens in dominions when you are a land nation versus a water nation is something that is just a game flaw. It is a game design flaw.
Detrimental to the game state.
right.
Yeah, if you are Abyssia and Relay decides to attack you all fucking game, good luck getting them to fuck off. Like it is not good to have water nations in your game.
Yeah.
They create not fair scenarios, and I think it allows players that are not good, hot take, to win in
Uh,
your qualifier rounds.
Well, I don't totally agree with you on that. I kind of agree because I think that underwater being this mechanic in and of itself means that it's really disadvantaged to try to do bans on underwater nations when there's multiple underwater nations. Obviously, in LA, it's not because you just ban Relier, but it's like it should be an option instead of saying I ban Yis, I ban Pelagia,
They
I
did do that
ban
last tournament.
Oceania, right? to just say like
Ban
I
all
want
of
to
the
ban
Yeah,
water.
last tournament
underwater.
that was an option. That was an option last tournament.
I don't. No, it wasn't.
Yeah, it just required more bans. Yeah, it required like 4 or some shit, but it definitely was.
No, you couldn't ban by category. Dark Wolf.
Imagine having to
Huh?
waste your
Not
bans
the
in a
one with,
competitive
not the one
format.
we all cared about. The one afterwards.
Oh, okay.
I
don't
just think
remember
it's
that.
stupid to have it like even in the get go. I think you should have bans if you're playing quote unquote. It's even stupid to say the sentence competitive dominions. This game is full of RNG and crazy events. You can
and,
get a gold event with Misfortune 3 that gives you 1,000 gold, and it's like,
and
haha,
yet,
not punished.
and
But see,
yet, we all play competitive Dominions.
listen, I'm not entering tournaments here and trying
Remember
to
Rainbow
whack
Wars?
my.
Z4 had it right.
You
Listen,
entered the last tournament. I'll probably enter the next
no, I didn't.
tournament. I won't
I
be
didn't.
good.
I didn't enter.
Yeah, you did.
I entered the first tournament
No, you entered
as a
last
joke
tournament. You entered as Vanheim.
in
Oh,
2021.
yes, you did. No,
Yeah.
no,
He
it was the
did.
one
Yeah,
after
yeah,
that.
I did. I did.
22.
That was such a
No, that was 22,
mistake.
I thought.
Yeah. After that,
Whatever.
what? No,
Okay,
no.
whatever. Not that important.
Well,
Tangent.
whatever. It was a mistake that I joined. I ended up picking Vanheim. I didn't want to play Vanheim. It was a terrible experience. Uh, I just think it's stupid in general because then the winners they just whack their dick around like I'm the turning winner. I don't know what I'm talking about, and it's like, well, y-
This feels kind of targeted. You don't like Rob?
I
Sora, do you have something specific against maybe a specific tournament winner that
uh,
plays Underwater Nation?
I don't know. Does said specific tournament winner lose when he goes on land? I don't know. All of a sudden, take away his underwater, he loses to a known bad player.
Maybe you simply have a grudge against one player born out of his late game
Listen,
underwater builds.
he might certainly be better than me, but I also don't. There's some bad rhetoric that comes from achievements like this.
All right, so we've given our definitions, and as you can see, listener, we have 4 different definitions of what makes an S tier nation. Um, between 4 different people, so you could see why these things are like contentious, because you could be arguing about things with people and not everyone even agrees on like how they would define S tier. But why don't we get into a little more like a little more of the crunch and start arguing amongst ourselves about like which nations we would like include or disinclude or like
All right.
hot takes.
I
think
say we
there's a
remove
couple-
all
No,
underwater.
I think there's a couple that are like kind of guaranteed, right? And those are, I think, Vanheim
Right.
No.
should be in your eight. Should be in your EAS tier.
Listen.
I
You need to
disagree.
define
Okay.
the age. You can't just say
I say
Vanheim.
EA.
Right. So EA
Yeah.
Vanheim. So I think that's S tier. Soren, do you think that's S tier?
In EA?
Yeah, Vanheim EA.
This is assuming 12-man games.
Okay, and
Sure.
I'm using my own criteria.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I would consider them pretty high up there. Even a noob with a really strong build. That's another consideration. If they don't have the build, maybe I don't care. You do kind of need the build for Vanheim, so maybe I don't consider them as. If
But
they
like,
have the
what's
build
the
though,
build?
ooh,
Right.
the build is your brain dead, blood bond, bark skin, fire shock, magic weapons garbage.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they are some S tier garbage that
And
even
it's
the
worth
most
noting. It's worth
trash.
noting that's not like a build that like you have to go really out of the box. That's very much some like straight up. Oh, they have Berserker. Oh, give them Bark Skin. Oh, they have Berserker. Oh, give them Blood Bond.
That
Oh, maybe
wasn't
they should-
known 3 years ago, was it? Or it
No,
was
it wasn't.
discovered at some point.
It was
I think
Johnny
3 years ago? No, it might have been known 3 years ago. But you
In
know what I mean.
2020
That was
By
discovered.
people, but
I hear-
just
It's not-
got it from Johnny.
I hear some.
It's not immediately apparent to go that build to
I-
like a
I
new
hear,
player.
I hear some terrible YouTuber just shout out a video on it so that now any old noob can go watch that and then just run the broken build.
Did you make a video on this, HT?
Yes, I did. It's
Yeah.
not
I
my
don't
build either.
remember all of
I
them.
stole that from Johnny and then made a video on it.
I don't think that was
I think
Johnny's
Arco
build anyway.
originally played it on Abyssia, and then it was just adapted to Vanheim because they're the other
Arco played
berserking.
Psy's Abyssia build. Psy had
No,
an
he
Abyssia.
didn't. Sai had Fate Weaving. I don't think he played Fate Weaving, did he?
Yeah, but Psy had Barkskin on it. On
Listen, I
Abyssia.
knew. I think
But it was there
Lola.
was also an MA build, and Arco
Uh,
played EA.
The
Wait,
origin
hold
of,
on.
the origin of the build has been lost to the mist of time, but now it is known.
Yeah, I saw the first time I saw it was either but from Lola. I know he played it against us in a
Oh,
blitz.
Lola ran that my first ever game. It was a blitz.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I killed it
Darkwolf
with Hydras.
literally fought Lola with that. And how long ago did you start Darkwolf?
Oh, dude, that was when COVID happened.
Yeah, so 2020. Yeah, it all appeared around 2020.
There
Yeah,
was
guys,
a really
interesting
no,
fact-
no, no, no. Hold on. There
Interesting
was
fact, that build
a
loses to Hydras.
Oh, fuck.
Wait, what?
He just like poisoned some of the guys, and then like they got poisoned.
I killed 10 of them. That was my achievement for my.
It doesn't
Lucid,
counter.
Oh, seven.
Lucid did a Hinnom series like years ago and got wrecked by Arco taking that on Abyssia in 2019, I think.
Okay, so we
Yeah.
still don't have a definite order. It might be Arcos.
It doesn't
might be
matter.
Psy's. Whatever.
That build
Yeah.
last year. Like,
But
you can't,
Whoever
like,
made it popular, Arco might have made it popular, but regardless, the build is frustrating to deal with. So it doesn't help that like Vanheim are arguably one of the best sacreds in the entire game. So giving them a strong build, and then if you actually split your troops and you don't stick 180 of your sacreds in one province like some people, then it's very hard to deal with. Yeah, don't do that. Please split your sacreds for the love of God. Don't call yourself.
So, Rob, you are the one dissenter. You would say the EA Vanheim is not in S tier. Is that correct?
Okay, here's what I'm gonna say. I want to qualify this by saying it's not that I don't think EA Van fits to some degree some of the criteria that I have listed out. I guess something I should have mentioned is all of the criteria I have. An important factor is how they relate to other nations, right? If every nation had every criteria, then nobody would be S tier.
Right.
I am not convinced that there is a single nation stronger compared to its contemporaries in EA to qualify as an S tier nation.
Okay.
Yeah, I disagree.
I haven't played that much EA. It's
No
not the age
German
I'm
in the
most
era?
comfortable in. Partially because I just don't like having less gold. But
I mean, I agree with you. I think EA
I
is.
would say it's possible that there are S tier nations there, and I simply don't know. But as an example, a lot of people seem to think Femoria is S tier.
They
Oh,
ain't.
hell no.
I don't see it, honestly.
I see why they do
Vanheim-
it. They're just not.
Vanheim
Like,
has some really obvious strengths, but they have some really obvious weaknesses too. Like they don't research for anything, and like go cast poison something, whatever, they're dead. So
so I have I kind of disagree with that on Vanheim. I'll just go into my spiel then. That the like, given my criteria, I think Vanheim's S tier because if you don't deal with them, you are facing down the 1 out of X chance that you are going 1 out of 12, let's say 1 out of 11 chance that you are going to be the victim of the Vanheim Bloodbond, Barkskin, Berserker, Fireshock, Magic
Turn
Weapons,
8.
Rush. And to me, building to counter that rush is possible, but it is so onerous on your build that it is just worth it to either first pick or ban them out anyway, regardless. It is just too high of a cost. That risk that you just have that die roll of either just dying or having to build around getting rushed. It is not worth it.
There's an
Wait,
interesting facet here. There's an interesting facet here because like we've talked about nations being able to operate in different stages of the game. But I think it's definitely worth noting that being a stronger nation in the early game is worth more than that same gap of strength in the late game because of the way snowballing works. And like you can say, oh, Vanheim's got like bad research, right? Unless they build owl quills and they make lanterns, which they can make at a certain stage. But like the idea is, you hit turn 30 and the Vanheim has two caps minimum, probably three, four, and you have one, two. So like you're in a situation where turn 20, the Vanheim has two caps, you have one, so you're competing with half the resources anyway, which makes up the gap. Plus, they still have their sacreds. Like people think of Hellblessed or Heavy Blessed Sacred, Stat Res, whatever, and they think
Hold
of
on.
them as if they lose their effectiveness after the first war. Go ahead, Smoke.
Let me stop you. So I want to thank HP for leaving with the caveat that you can address these rushes, unlike a few years ago where people used to talk about Ashdod and the Ashdod quote unquote rush, and they were
We
like,
call that
it
the
is
brown dot.
uncounterable. You cannot survive it. You can survive any rush, I would say, in Dominions. There's nothing, if you have the right build, you can probably survive, but it's hard, right? Because when you have less
Yeah,
resources, you have less to play around with. If you lose a small amount of stuff, you might not survive a particular rush. And distance and other factors are going to weigh in whether or not you can, actually survive a rush. It's now that
right.
I think about that, if you're 10 provinces away from someone's cap that is the rusher, you're probably going to survive the rush. Cough, cough from them. But yeah, that was probably the biggest meme duel we've seen. Just have
Yeah,
a
we can ignore that though and just move
But
on. 'Cause I don't even remember what the build was, so I'm not even gonna comment
yeah,
on it.
yeah. But anyways, I wanted to like point that out. So like the dealing with the rush is an important factor. I would argue maybe I might not place Vanheim in S, maybe A, but still like if a noob takes that build and they run at you, like you're gonna have a hard time, especially if you don't have the counter, because not everyone
right,
goes into the game with a counter to the build, because who the fuck wants to do that? And there's no guarantee that that player takes that build either. So there's this song and dance that happens. Like unless you have the quote unquote meta read of someone, do you know if they're gonna take the build? And
right.
and the community's had some interesting opinions all of a sudden in the last year when they were a year before against it about metagaming. That's another topic, I suppose. But
Yeah, I will admit that my criteria does carry like a big weakness, and that I generally assume that you're going into a tournament and you're assuming like mid plus level play and like meta builds out of everybody, and that's how I'm basing my tier list, because I think that kind of play is where a tier list is like the most useful to somebody. Like if I was gonna show like a noob my tier list or whatever, it'd be like, well, okay, like why are you making a list of like ranked nations for competitive? It's like because if you're playing competitively, that's what, or semi-competitively, whatever, as competitively as we play, that's what you want to look at. So my criteria does have that weakness of like, well, it doesn't actually tell you. It could, I could rank a nation highly, and it's just an absolute fucking micro nightmare to play. Where like the top players could do it, but like the mid-level players would just like throw up in a bucket if they looked at it, and then like the noobs would just be totally lost. Like,
I'm
Well,
not.
I did have another point I wanted to make on your criteria, which is while it's true, I think in some cases, like the strength of a rush is disproportionately represented in your criteria there, HB.
uh,
Because if my main concern is I want to get myself into the mid game to have a chance, like how highly are you valuing not dying immediately versus the other guy being able to win the game with their build, right? Because you could make an argument, and I'm not sure how true it is, that while yes, a Vanheim can take a really strong early game build and snowball, it's also possible they can take a really strong early game build, go kill somebody, and 10 turns later still not be the first place player, right?
that's true. My
I guess I don't
my
know. I
Vanheim,
might be articulating it poorly, but
well,
my I guess what I'm trying to say is people might simply, be fine taking Vanheim in a second war, but not want to face them in a first war,
right.
and so that's why they ban them.
Well, yeah, but like my how do I want to say this? My assumption that has less to do with my like criteria for what makes an S nation, more of like my what I consider like an acceptable defeat chance. Whereas I'm a very early game centric player, and people know that. But like I consider the 1 out of 11 chance of losing in the early game to just be unacceptable, right? Of just getting rushed and not having anything to deal with it and dying it. To be just unacceptable. That's why I rank generally Ubar very lowly, even though that they're often like a banned nation, because since they don't have a sacred until their god comes and their god can't be awake, they can't actually counter build.
Their sacred is really unimpressive.
Right,
Also, because you only get one per turn.
but they physically can't counter build
Yeah.
a rush. So I typically rank them very lowly. I know that other players, and including good players, I know Sai is the opposite way of me, that consider it like they'll take a die roll to just die in the early game if that nation gives them late game advantage. And that's, I think, why Femoria ends up in the S tier so much. I don't think it
Wait,
deserves to be there, but like,
can we define? So, are we including
I
water
don't.
nations or are we not?
uh,
Because like, if we're talking about EA, I would put like Therodos in S tier.
so
But if
yeah.
we're not including
If we include
water,
water nations, Therodos is the best nation in EA by leaps and bounds.
We can include water nations.
I don't want to include water nations because I think water nations shouldn't be in competitive because it's stupid. But I think like just for EA for like I would value Therodos a lot more than Vanheim because
I
if Van spawned is next to Therodos, have fun getting raided by
well,
stupid ghosts all game.
I would put them both in S tier, but my S tier for EA is kind of crowded. But like I would consider those both S tier. And you're
I,
right that like if yeah Therados Vanheim can do the funniest possible thing and take water breathing and kill
but
Therados,
they're
which is
they're
hilarious, but
not.
no one will ever do that. That's not realistic. like,
Like
um,
Legends HP. Legends saying that one time there was an early age Vanheim. They decided that they did not like the water nation idea. And so what they did was they took water breathing and they elfed them. And of course, because the water nation did not see this coming at all, because why would you?
right. They
They
got
Would
lost
have to take
everything
that.
immediately and they just got wrecked.
Listen, you would have to take that shit dormant or something, and then
uh,
you're gonna be like at a less strong start.
no, it's not. That
The
wasn't as
surprise
serious.
factor is so great that you
That
simply
is
Like
not
lose
if
a
there's
everything
three water
instantly.
nations
that,
on the map, and you take Bark Skin, Fire, Shock, Res,
Water
fucking
breathing.
Blood Bond, Water Breathing,
It's
Dormant.
water 7. That's so
well. I
tough.
This has been gone over before, by
yeah,
the way.
it's not
Water
a
breathing,
serious
God bless.
consideration in tier list. Honestly, it's just a very
That
funny
is true.
thing that has happened once. Um,
Yes.
but to answer your earlier question, Soren, since we're probably not even going to have time to go over all the like S tier nations or could be S tier nations, we're like, if you want to talk about a water nation and why it's S tier, including water nations, then we can do so.
No,
But
the only water nation I consider S is Therados. I think the other ones are like I don't
yeah,
know. I,
I
I I just wouldn't include them because then it's like then you have to rank the other ones, and I don't really like water nations in general. But
I
being able to sit in a pond and jerk off and
I
potentially win,
I think the water meta is very interesting. Honestly, like I think it adds an interesting meta dimension. It kind of like makes the game shittier, but it makes the meta game more interesting because you
Well,
have this like
I
sub
don't
meta
like
game
it.
that you play with the water nations where like it's almost a prisoner's dilemma where if you like take solo water that's really powerful with some of the nations like Yis solo is extremely strong, but if you take Yis you can get counter picked by Knights of the Deep. But if you're a Pelagia solo, like, what the fuck are you doing with your life? Like,
apparently you're waiting for late game and then you wish spam.
Listen,
That's being nerfed, by the way, I think, if I remember
I
correctly.
just think
good.
it's all stupid because it's like you. This is
Well,
how I view it. You're front loading like the quote unquote fun of the metagaming and early game rushing, and then mid and later, anyone who has allowed these fuckers into their game and they're not dead has to suffer with the terrible "I'm a water nation and I'm attacking you" mechanic. And then it's like, if you want to attack me, enjoy making 10,000 water items and killing yourself. Like, and it's just like bad design. Like they should be free items, honestly, or there should be some mechanic that doesn't
Right.
require you to lose your entire gems or all your fucking gold. Or
Well,
it should be. It's so bad, bro.
I mean, I had the idea that, and this is, me tooting my own horn, but I had the idea of, like, making, like, provinces that are, like, coastal, that extend into the land and water, where you just have that, like, land nations, like, land units and aquatic units and amphibious units are all able to fight each other on, so that there's actually a battlefield that you share that you can actually fight over.
Yeah, but then you still have the issue of like, if they sit in their cap, like you want to bring your mages, have a fucking ring that's 5 fucking
Look, if they
doubloons.
want to
Fuck
be
you.
3 provinces, I don't give a shit. Like,
Yeah, well, but if that was like, if they only got like their cap circle or something, and then everything else they had to fight over, maybe I wouldn't
This is
care.
why you play Therodos.
Oh,
well,
listen, it's
Therodos. We'll talk about that. Does anyone disagree that Therodos is S tier in this call? Because I know that's a hot take among the community, but I think not among this group.
Not familiar enough with it to say much.
Okay.
God, I just think the fact that it is the nation that I have the highest win percentage on.
listen.
We
Let's
should talk
Oh,
move.
about
that speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Let's move
Yeah.
out of shitty EA, the land of the worst
I
nations. By the
I
way,
actually
the other
before you
S8.
go, before we move, I think there's a nation that my view on has changed a lot that I
I
think is
think
really interesting to talk about, and that's TNN.
I think TNN is S tier if you have some competence, but
Uh,
well, if not SA,
I would
but
agree that
Yeah, they're top
Tirnanog
tier.
is S tier.
Tiernanog is
Some people
amazing.
have rated them lowly, and I don't
T-
understand
uh,
how
T-
you can look at the nation and rate
I'd
them
rather
lowly.
play TNN any day over fucking playing Vanheim. But that's
I
my
would
opinion.
too. I just prefer TNN style though.
Tirnanog is, I think, one of the only, if not the only, nation that I would rank S tier out of general competence, and not just because they have some janky broken fucking thing.
Yeah,
Like,
TNN as a
You have a great skill expression as that nation, but if you're a donut who stakes all of your stuff in one spot and
right.
dies to Earth, no, I can't keep
Yeah,
on
you
making
got
that up.
Tyranids,
Uh,
you got
listen,
assassins, you got magic
this is
phase
what
movement,
happens
you
when we
got
talk
air,
about the
you
game
got
before our podcast
an
starts.
elf stat
Great
sacred, you
thugs,
got
yeah.
stealth, you got, yeah, it's got everything.
Good mages,
A2
good thugs,
assassins.
Cubes.
yeah, yeah,
cubes,
you
foul
got all
vapors,
the
traps.
tools.
Hey, it's HP Munchcraft here. Hey, it's HP Munchcraft, one of the co-hosts. I have broken up this episode into multiple parts, mostly for my own editing and rendering purposes and sanity. So we will resume next time. We will continue this episode into the middle and late ages on what makes S tier nations S tier. So I will see you then.